Hey everyone, my name is Reggie and welcome to my channel. Today I will be sharing with you my January wrap-up. So these are all of the books I read in January, which there are 19 of them, which is amazing. I'm so excited and glad that I had such a great reading month. Not only was it a lot of books I read in the month of January, they were all, for the most part, enjoyable reads, which was such an exciting thing. And I'm so glad I was able to kick off the new year in January with such a robust and wonderful reading month. I'm hoping this is like a quick peek at the year to come. If you're new to my channel, I definitely recommend subscribing, hitting the bell notification because I post new videos on this channel every single week. And if you enjoy it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I know there are a few new people to my channel, so I will share with you as a little tidbit that I organize my wrap-ups from the book I rated the least to the most. I read a couple series this month in almost their entirety. So that's a little different because I want to be able to talk about the series as a whole, so I'll kind of group those together. But I think I was pretty fortunate in the month that I was able to rate most of those books similarly, so it'll still work from my least favorite to my most favorite. We'll start off by talking about the Grocery Trilogy. This was a reread for me, and I reread Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising. I think I gave Shadow and Bone like 3.5 or maybe 3 stars. Siege and Storm was like 2.5, and then Ruin and Rising was 2. So this is like one of those super nostalgic series for me, which is especially why Shadow and Bone got like a little bit higher than the rest, because I don't think it's necessarily remarkably better than the other two in the series. I think the world is very fascinating. The world is built very well, and the reread was very interesting because I found during my reread that Alana was far more annoying of a main character for me. Mal was not annoying compared to the first time I read him, like not annoying at all. And Jacqueline was like not as attractive in like his power or his like, not just like as like an attractive character, but like his power, his character wasn't as like drawing to me. Nikolai is my favorite character in the series, and he is just as wonderful. So that was not a disappointment. If you don't know what these books are about, I guess I should give you a description. This is a YA Russian inspired fantasy in which we have these people called the Grisha who have special powers, and in this world there's just presence of darkness that we're trying to fight against, and our main character finds out that she has a Grisha power, didn't know about it until she was like a teenager. Typically that thing is unearthed when you're a kid, so it's her going through the process of going to the palace and training to use her power and trying to fight against the darkness. There's a lot of tropes in these. The characters are range from like poorly written to wonderfully written. The plot point is okay. The pacing is really what I think suffers the most in these books. But like I said, they were super nostalgic reads. I read these back in like 2013, 2014. I read these before I even joined BookTube or started watching BookTube. I remember not knowing how to react to these two when I first read them. So going back was a very interesting experience. Partly nostalgic, partly like, These books have always been hyped on BookTube, and I've never understood the hype. Now that like the reread is so strong as more books in the series come out, it's interesting to see more booktubers kind of going back to these books and either rereading them or reading them for the first time and being like, maybe not. And I kind of finally feel like people understand my opinions of not liking these books necessarily. I think some people are too harsh on these. I think some people are too kind to these. I think they're like solid 2-3. Nothing horrible, nothing that great. But like I said, super nostalgic, so I'm glad I reread these, especially to be reintroduced to Nikolai and remember why I loved him so much, because that's definitely the best part of this. Next up, I read a nonfiction book called Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. This is a book that talks about like dealing with change. It's a cute little tale about like 2 mice and 2 little people, they call them, that are like the size of mice but have human brains, and it's talking about how we interpret and deal with change and how you should deal with change. It's super short, super cheesy, super uplifting, all that fun stuff. I think it was a good read. I think the writing wasn't the greatest. It's also sourced in this like frame story, and I hated the frame story. I hated the people in the frame story. It's like centered around this like high school reunion, and the people at the reunion were super awful. Like the mice had better personalities than the people at this reunion, so the frame story didn't work for me. But the story is cute. It's super short, like under 100 pages. So if you hate change, maybe read this. I enjoyed this enough. I gave it 3.5 stars. This was highly recommended to me by one of my coworkers, so I read it and it was a good time. Not the greatest, but I definitely think about it now when I think about change, like, oh, I'm thinking about this like little tale. So, I mean, that was the goal. Successful. Next up, we'll talk about the Six of Crows duology. So if you don't know, this is the follow-up series to the Grocery Trilogy, which I talked about in the beginning of this video. It's a 2-book series duology consisting of Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, I didn't mention it, but the Grocery Trilogy as well as these are written by Leigh Bardugo. And this is set in a different city in the same world. So there's Grisha in this world as well. But this follows a cast of characters who are part of like this kind of gang. And they're trying to complete this like unimaginable heist. And Crooked Kingdom deals with the ramifications of their attempted heist. These books are so much better than the Grisha books. But I again think these are overhyped. I think these are solid 4 stars for me. Gave this one 4. This one 4, maybe 4.5. This is definitely stronger, but I don't know if it's stronger enough to get a higher rating. I love these, but again, like I said, I think they're overhyped. I think the characters are fantastic. I think the story is like weirdly paced again. Leigh Bardugo, in my opinion, has some issues with pacing in all of her books. The story is really interesting. The world's really fleshed out. The characters are so much better in this. But I still don't get attached to all of them the way some people do. I think the diversity in these books are way better than the Grisha books. I'm not as nostalgic about these as I am about the Grisha books, but these are clearly better. Is a weird thing. I enjoyed all of these books that I read this month by Leigh Bardugo. Next up, I have Animal Farm by George Orwell. I was surprised by how much I loved this. I gave this a 4 stars. So I'm trying to do a project this year where I read rereads, classics, or nonfiction every month. And I clearly got the rereads in because Six of Crows duology and Grisha books were all rereads for me. And this is my classic. It's super short. I think it's actually technically classified as a novella. So again, wonderful to get through quickly. And it's written in such a like simplistic way, but not in a bad way. I don't mean that in like a horrible offensive way. It's so clearly trying to let the message be the driving force of this, and I think that's so interesting and I enjoy that so much. In the story there are a bunch of animals who rise up against the farmer that's in charge of them and kind of creating this brutality, and they break away and create their own farm, and it's their journey on kind of the circle of what happens when they take over their own farm. I was really surprised that I enjoyed this so much, and I'm really glad this was the first classic I read this year. So hopefully I'm on good track to read some really good classics this year with this one at the helm of my challenge. Next up, we're going to talk about the last Leigh Bardugo book I finished this month, and that is Language of Thorns. This is kind of like a small bind up of novella short story type things that take place in the Grisha world, but aren't necessarily like integral to the stories. I thought this was the best thing I've read by Leigh Bardugo. I really enjoyed these. They're like little fairy tales. If you haven't read the Grisha books, I still recommend these. I think these are so great on their own. There's little things you'll pick up on them, like locations or like power sets or things like that, but those aren't necessary to understanding the little fairy tales of this, and they're super fun, super enjoyable. I specifically liked the first one. It was fantastic, and every story in this got a 4 or a 5 stars for me, and I averaged them out. It got a 4.5, so this is the highest thing I've rated by Leigh Bardugo. It's my favorite work. I think it's her best of her writing. It's the most beautiful book, like just inside and out, and I think it's fantastic. I was just blown away by how much I love this, and I'm really glad I read it. Next up, we have If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson. This was the first pick for Life's Library's book club, which is a book club hosted by John Green and Rosianna Rojas, and I love them both so much, so I was super excited when they started a book club, and I joined it. And this book is so good. So this is about the friendship and love story of 2 kids, and one is a black boy and then there's a Jewish white girl, and they're going through a relationship with those stares and looks that interracial relationships oftentimes get. And this book was so good. It was like completely predictable, simply written, really short, really fast to get through. It's kind of heavy-handedly written, which I think is why it was often predictable, but that did not take away at all from the emotions I got from it and how I felt reading it. I think the ending is, like I said, completely predictable, and I was not surprised for a second by it, but I still cried during it. And I think that's the mark of good writing, is predictability doesn't usually bug me. It can be annoying when it's not done well, but I think the thing is about a book being written predictably is that if it can still pack a punch, even if I'm not surprised, if I still like felt something in that moment, I think that's the mark of an amazing writer. That's what I got from this book. It was so profound, so beautiful. Like I said, simply told, doesn't delve deep to me into a lot of topics, but it's like so softly, that's funny because it's in the title, it's so softly written that it's so impactful and so lovely. I really enjoyed it. and I gave this a 4.5 stars. Highly recommended. Next up, I read Goodbye Perfect. This is a book that's been out in the UK for a year or two, but it's being published in the US. Well, it was published in January in the US, so I got an e-arc of it, and wow, I loved this. I gave this 4.5 stars. I'm actually considering doing a review on this book, so if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments down below, and I won't go into it too in-depth in case I do a review on it. So this is a story of a young girl, I think she's 15 or 16, and her best friend runs off with a teacher and like literally runs away with him. And so it's that student-teacher trope, but it's not, because it's told from her best friend's perspective, who didn't know this relationship was happening in this way. She knew her best friend like had a dude, didn't know it was a teacher, and when they run away, everyone approaches her like, how did you not know? So it deals a lot with her grappling with not knowing her friend keeping these secrets from her, but it also tackles that idea of like a student-teacher relationship and her personal breaking it down of like why this is weird and not okay. And it was so fascinating. You don't root for the main character all the time. She doesn't always make the right choices. It doesn't matter, because that's the point. She's a flawed character figuring herself out, and she's learning what she thinks about this along the way, and it's so wonderful. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very impactful. Next up is a bulk of what I read in the month of January, and that is Saga Volumes 1 through 8. These are again rereads. So I read Saga Volume 1, Saga Volume 2, you know how this goes, Volume 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These were all, like I said, rereads in anticipation of Volume 9, which I haven't read this month and I will get to in February, but I reread all of the published trade paperbacks that were out because it's been like a year since I read Volume 8, maybe 4 or 5 years since I read the first volume. I think I read the first volume in 2014. So it's been a while, and I felt like revisiting the entire series, which was a blast. I gave each of these volumes 5 out of 5 stars individually. I really love these. Considering doing a series review when I finish the 9th one, depending on how I feel about the 9th one. Saga is a sci-fi graphic novel series written by Brian K. Vaughan, illustrated by Fiona Staples. If you're unaware, Saga is a wonderful space opera, sci-fi, Romeo and Juliet inspired love story. We follow Marco and Elena, who are on opposite sides of the war, fall in love, have a kid, and then have to go on the run because of that war. Nobody wants them to be together. And it's fascinating and lovely and beautiful and fantastic. I love it so much. So delving back into them was a blast. It was so much fun. I can't wait to read the 9th volume, but that was a bulk of what I read. Actually, it's not, because I read most of these in one day, but it's a bulk of this wrap up. The author and the illustrator aren't continuing on for a while. They're definitely going to continue, but they're taking a break for now. And that means the first 9 trade paperbacks are kind of the first story within the series, and so it's concluded. So if you're interested in a review of that first like 1 through 9, that first arc, first half of the series, let me know. I might film it anyway because I'm really excited to talk about these more. Most people have read them, I think, so it might be fun to do spoilery. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm just excited and slightly nervous to read Volume 9 because I've read a lot of Brian K. Vaughan and his endings. Whew, so we have one left. It is my favorite book I read this month, and also a book I have a review of on my channel already, so I won't talk about it too long, but this is The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. This was a 5 out of 5 stars. This was the first book I read this month, and it was the best book to start off the new year on. I loved it so much. This follows our main character, Ren, who lost her best friend in a car accident a year ago. She is in the Denver airport, snowed in, and the worst snowstorm they've had in a century, and she loses her cell phone, which has a unread text message from Lottie, her best friend who died a year ago. We're quickly approaching the anniversary of her best friend's death, and if she doesn't get a flight out of the Denver airport quickly, she's going to be stuck there for that anniversary. This is a wonderful story of grief, of kind of being metaphorically stuck in not knowing how to move on, but not knowing how to process things like that. It's also got the most healthy romance I've read in such a long time. If you're interested in my review of this book and more thoughts, definitely recommend clicking the I, because I will link it there for you. It's worth your time. Go check out that video. Go consider reading this book. It's fantastic, underhyped, under-talked about. It's lovely. Okay, maybe not my most articulate wrap-up ever, because that was a lot of books to talk about and not a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun. So if you enjoyed this video, like I said, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.